am Jackie Fuller, and this is blog post number 4, Power of Stories, with a bit of a wild card twist. So when I think of the power of stories, I think of representation, right? As we all know, it matters. Um, I am, I will admit, and I am a little bit ashamed because I am 38 years old. Little Red Riding Hood. It has been adapted into various formats, different versions, sometimes read as a villain, sometimes the wolf eats her. It goes on and on and on. Until last month, I have never visualized Little Red as being anything other than the default white character, because that what makes a majority of children's books, even now in 2025. And it wasn't until last month I attended an author talk with Dr. Brownwood. She is an author, she's a scholar, she was a teacher. She was given a talk on reluctant readers because she herself was a reluctant reader, and that was because she couldn't find herself in stories. And so she has published about 30 books, and I just had to have this one by her, Mahogany, which mahogany is a shade of red, if you didn't catch it. Beautiful, beautiful story, beautifully illustrated. It follows this girl, Mahogany, who is smart, crafty, just quick as a whip, outsmarts the wolf, saves herself, saves her grandma, and it's fantastic. It does not focus on the color of her skin, which some of these like BIPOC stories with these characters seem to focus and get hung up on. Same thing can be said for LGBTQ plus, as if it's a problem needing to be solved. No, it's just a characteristic, and that's it. Just leave it there. So I absolutely love that. And I was just, if I had that book as a kid, I would have been demanding more books like it. Because I got stuck in that silo and I was just like, well, there's nothing else. And it's like, I can't do anything about it. So I just will accept what is available. The other thing that I think of when I think of power stories are the stories that were meant for adults, but children latched onto. I like to say that we underestimate kids and we do it all the time. For example, Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Here's my copy of the classic novel. It's like 450 pages. It, like I said, it was not meant for adults, but kids just were like, no, like an orphan that has to overcome all these tragedies. And it's like he doesn't get a break until he is like this close from like just breaking apart. And then, like, dun, 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 he's saved. It has been adapted into junior classic editions, as you can see, not 450 pages. It has been adapted into illustrated young reader editions. It has been even less than 100 pages chapter books and young adult graphic novels. Widely popular, I don't like to say like it's withstood the test of time. We have the story tropes and all of that, but just to show you just like how popular this is and like, the power of these stories and just like the different age ranges and audiences that this has been adapted to. Now, if you imagine yourself as a public librarian or as a school librarian, it's one of those, it's part of our responsibility to always be kind of vigilant and see like what the trends are, to keep our libraries successful. So for example, if you have juvenile or elementary school age children and they're having to go up into young adult to get their hands on a graphic novel, it might be within like their reading level and like comprehension, but it's also one of those, not that they're going to necessarily like be exposed to these other more complex and gritty topics and we have ruined these children. But they're having to reach up and it might be just a little bit too complex for them, or they're having to go down into picture books and easy readers. And if we pay attention to habits and behaviors like that, as librarians, we can reach out to these publishing houses and say like, hey, there's this gap. Could you please address it? And publishing houses absolutely do. You can also look at the past 100 years of publishing, looking at the 1920s with like the Browning books. And again, this goes into representations. Those were basically almost like a Reader's Digest that featured Black and like African American families and children just doing normal things, right? Again, it wasn't about their skin tone, and that it had to, a problem that had to be solved. We look at world influences at the end of World War II. We started, children's literature started to see an increase of patriotic books and how to be an outstanding citizen. 1960s, we had the civil rights movement that made some impacts. 1980s, we started to see publishing. A lot of these smaller publishing houses were being bought up. And we started to see a dip in like BIPOC stories getting published. And then now we have authors that are able to self-publish themselves, and they shouldn't be discredited. But there's absolutely trends in this, and if you want to dig into it, so there's the Cooperative Children's Book Center. One of the things that they do is each year there'll be like, say, 3,000 children's books published. They will go through and find out, okay, how many of these are just default white characters, white stories? And then see, all right, out of everything else that's remaining, what's the percentage of Black stories? What's the percentage of Native American stories? What's the percentage of LGBTQ plus members? And they can either be the protagonist or they can be a really important secondary character. And you will see those shifts happen. But the other thing that we have going on, like present day, and I'm curious to see what the 2025 report that will happen next year will reflect, when we have influences such as like the political landscape in the United States, and we have that executive order that is just trying to dismantle DEI. How is that going to affect these publishing houses? What's the impact it's going to have on these like independent publishers? So again, it's part of our responsibility to just kind of keep advocating for these diverse books, paying attention to the trends and behaviors of our patrons to keep those stories strong, to, change the habits of that reluctant reader and help them find a love of learning that will exist throughout their entire lifetime. And that's what I have. Thank you so much for your time.